Previously on Chaos Head Noah.
最初はそこにはなかったって思い込んでたけど、記憶違いだった。僕の脳内での妄想だよ。だってみんなあそこには花壇があったって言ってるんでしょ。力とかそういうわけのわからないものじゃなくて、ただの思い込みだったんだ。
いや、君には力がある。そうだろ？
死にたくない。
そうだろ？
わからない。殺さないで。
君は自分の天才的な力についてもっと自覚するべきだよ。その潜在能力はすごすぎる。君なら世界を変えることだってできるんだ。
I wanted to go home. I wanted to hold up inside my base and play ESO forever, glued to a chair for eternity like a disabled person. I wanted to spend my days grinning over Saratan's figure and marathoning Bloodtune on loop. That was all I'd wished for. Suddenly, a blinding light hit me. I squinted reflexively and looked away. Then, when my eyes landed upon the Jumbotron of the closest building, what I saw was, unmistakably, me. Huh? Me? On the Jumbotron was my own face. My own face, covered in tears, and with my mouth hanging half open like an idiot. My back was hunched too. For a split second, I thought I was hallucinating. A chill ran through me, as I thought that someone was secretly recording me somewhere. I then considered if what was being projected there was actually images taken from my thoughts by Shougan. But after exhausting every last possible option, I realized that it had to be a live feed of me, right this very moment, at this very place. And the video playing on the Jumbotron even had a news ticker featuring sensational taglines.
そうだよ。すでに多くのヒントが提示されているよね。君にはもう見えているはず。君の眼下に広がっているその景色の中に。
So, what he was saying was, Shougan was hiding a D-sword somewhere in the scenery I was looking at, and I just had to find it?
見つけたら許してくれるの？
見つけるだけじゃクエストクリアにはならない。実際に剣を手に入れるんだ。その場から一歩も動いちゃならないっていうルールを破らないようにしてね。
There was no way I could do that. If I couldn't move from here, how was I supposed to grasp the fucking sword? What the hell did he even want me to do? Within the night landscape blurred by my teary eyes. Amid the scenery in which light was warped by my welling tears, I found a spot that looked just like a sword. Just like what Iyase had said. I hadn't noticed it at first, but when I ever so slightly altered my perspective, it was there before I knew it. Even if it had just been a coincidence, I was more than happy with it. The more I thought of it as a sword, the more defined it became, and over time, it was becoming more and more real. It was slowly turning to a definite part of the scenery. And eventually, even its contours became clearly distinguishable.
見つけたんだね。
Likely having noticed my change in demeanor, Shougan immediately spoke to me.
では手を伸ばしてその剣を切り取ってほしい。深く考えなくていいんだ。君にならできるよ。
できるわけないじゃん。ダメ、タッキー、
I sniffled, sucking up the snot that had been dripping from my nose. I then turned around and started walking towards Shougan.
誰が動いていいと許可した？クエストはまだクリアしていないぞ。
僕は勇者なんかじゃない。妹一人救えないようなヘタレな妹だよ。僕に期待しないで。僕を見ないで。僕をそっとしておいて。
ではナナミちゃんは殺すことにするよ。
どうせもう死んでる。
She was already dead. Nanami had been brutally murdered by Shougan. Everyone would report on it starting tomorrow, treating it as the 6th new gen incident. It saddened me, but there was nothing I could do about it. Yes, there is, you dumbass!
どんな手品だこりゃ。
How was the surveillance camera footage able to capture her sword? That shouldn't be possible, right? The people in the video went into a panic when faced with the sudden appearance of the sword. But the girl did not seem to care about the people around her. The man with the rucksack, however, was very clearly terrified. He tried desperately to scramble to his feet and run away. But the girl would not allow that. With incredibly agile movement, she pursued the fleeing man and swung her gigantic sword as if it was light as a feather. In a manner akin to a violent windstorm, the sword tore the man's rucksack to pieces. The impact was so strong, the man immediately collapsed to the ground. Despite this, he appeared uninjured. In fact, when the police officers arrived on the scene immediately after receiving the call, they had not found even a single trace of blood.
一体この娘は何者だ？
西尾君、帽子はどうなっちゃったのかな？
結局ニュージェルの犯人は誰なのかわからないということですか？
そのダーススパイダーのヘルメットは何か超能力と関係あるのかな？西条さん、答えてくれませんか？これで終わりなんて言うなら電波ジャックですよ。
結局何がしたかったんです？ニュージェネに便乗した売人行為ですか？不謹慎だと思わないですか？
ユーリ・ブライトマンさんとは最近話したから。そんなこと話した？地震とニュージェネについて何か関係あると思いますか？
その手に持っている美少女フィギュアは何らかの儀式的なアイテムと考えていいんですか？
このような行動を取ったことにはアニメやゲームの影響はあったのかな？西条さん、西条君。
Back on the rooftop, I had given up so easily on obtaining the D-sword. I had Saratan's seductive voice in my ear, but that was just my pathetic self pretending to be someone else. I was the one who'd made the decision. I'd made myself look like a pitiful victim. I'd chosen to sacrifice Nanami so that I would survive. I hated myself. How fucking pathetic I was. If only I just tried just a little bit harder. I told myself that I'd given up of my own volition, but now that it was all over, I regretted every single thing I'd done on that rooftop. I was absolutely disgusted with myself. She was gone. Nothing could save her now. And yet, even still, I couldn't help but think that if I could just go back to that rooftop, and I just tried a little bit harder. But I knew that, even if I could actually go back, I'd just give up all over again. Find some other excuse to get me out of it. Well, I have the power of saving, so maybe I could do something different. That was just who I was. A completely useless, irredeemable piece of shit.
西条さん
将軍にまんまと騙された。なんという壮大な釣りだよ。
This poor nurse. She must be so confused right now. She was alive. Nanami was alive. I could see that bratty ass face of hers again. I could hear that obnoxious, shrill voice of hers again. The mere thought was enough to bring me a deep sense of relief, an intense joy that rose from the bottom of my heart.
よかった。
I couldn't stop crying. But the tears weren't the tears of regret I'd been crying earlier.
よかった。
And so it continues. Greetings, my name's Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play of Chaos Head Noah. So, even though I still very much want to see Nanami alive, safe and sound for myself in order to confirm that she at the very least wasn't actually harmed in any way by our mysterious Shougan figure from the previous episode, I am still of the belief that she's in danger, because even if she wasn't actually harmed in any way, it doesn't really change the fact that our Shougan character was able to get his hands, on Nanami's phone and bracelet. So that at the very least confirms that, well, Shougan knows where Nanami and Takumi's family lives. So yeah, she's still in danger, as is probably Takumi's parents too, for that matter. In other words, we're not really out of the woods with this guy, as far as I'm concerned. Even if we do see for ourselves that Nanami is perfectly unharmed, and that her hand is still attached to her wrist. I'm still curious as to why Shougan, if this is indeed the same Shougan we've seen up until the last episode, decide to approach us the way they did this time around. Because the first figure that we've seen, calling themselves Shougan, showed up to us face to face in the middle, right in front of the 107, in the middle of the deserted Shibuya. He had no problems whatsoever making the entirety of the rest of the city's population disappear just to arrange that face-to-face meeting. And ever since that point, he's been apparently silently stalking us, just out of our line of sight. So why now, out of all times, does he decide to keep himself out of sight, but also use a voice changer and a dummy to communicate with us? Seems very odd for him to do, given the powers he's displayed beforehand. So I've got two different theories as to why that is. Which, well, I guess they're, well, maybe not so much theories, but rather two possibilities. Either this is the same Shougan that we have been dealing with up until this point, but for some reason he had to use an alternative means to communicate and interact with us that's different from how he's been able to do up until present. Or the Shougan that we dealt with in the previous episode was a completely different person that somehow knew of our communications with those Shougan we've been dealing with up until now, and chose to impersonate them. Now, why would Shougan? Why would, in the case of the first possibility, Shougan suddenly have problems arranging face-to-face communications with us? I don't know the answer to that. And as for possibility number two, who would go around trying to impersonate Shougan, and for what reason? I don't know the answer to that either, unfortunately. No matter how I look at it, it's very strange. Everything that happened in the last episode in relation to the Shougan that we were dealing with, everything about them was just simply strange. Unless we are given an explanation as to why this discrepancy exists from the man himself, and the man himself doesn't indeed confirm that it is indeed him, I'm going to lean towards option B, that it was likely somebody else impersonating him. Even though, like I said, I got no real evidence to really back that assertion up other than just a feeling. Anyway, enough of this little preamble. We're clearly in the meeting, and I'm keeping everybody up. Yet another meeting had been called in the main conference room in the Shibuya Police Department, joining one of the multiple others that had been held today. The exhausted, fed-up detectives all wondered how many more hours worth of unproductive meetings they would be forced to sit through. You know, I just remembered something. I've still been thinking about the crucifixion murder on and off, or to be more specific, how it was reported to the rest of the investigation unit. Everything about that's still greatly bothering me, and the fact that I've yet to see anybody point out any contradictions towards what was reported in the investigation report and what we have seen as Takumi. It feels even more off to me. Why that murder in particular? Why was that one seemingly so different in the investigation? Well, then again, like I believe I remember saying even back then here, I haven't actually seen the other murders take place either, except for the group dive. So I guess I can't 100% confirm with absolute certainty that the crucifixion murder is indeed completely different to how the other murders were reported to the mass media, save for maybe the group dive. But I don't think the story would present all these differences to us right in front of us like that, unless they wanted us to notice something with that particular murder. My first instinct as to why this discrepancy exists is maybe some higher up that's involved in the investigation unit is maybe trying to doctor information and lead the investigation unit astray, because as has already been established, we have the Nozomi group and the Committee of 300 and all these other related figures that are taking part in some big grandiose experiment with Shibuya, and they have a vested interest in keeping the amount of information that is being filtered to the general public, and even within parts of their own within other factions that they're related to. They have a vested interest in keeping too much information from getting out to all these other groups and individuals. But you would think, if that was the case, if the information is being doctored from up high, that somebody who was directly involved with the investigation of the crime scene itself would have said something by now if there was a contradiction in what's reported and what they may have seen within the crime scene itself. And I came up with a possible theory as to why this might be the case, assuming I'm not just reading too deeply into this. Somebody within the investigation unit itself, someone who had access to the crime scene, may have tampered with the crime scene itself before the initial reports were filed. That's the only thing I can think of that could really explain this mystery. Either that, or somebody with supernatural powers who altered the crime scene, which, given what we've seen so far with the D-sword wielders and the power of delusions being manifest in Shibuya, I can't exactly dismiss that as a possibility. I can't discount that possibility either. That somebody who's not that's somebody who has supernatural powers who isn't involved with the investigation unit. Okay, I'm tripping over my own words here and I'm stumbling a little bit, but in a nutshell, I think somebody might have tampered with the crime scene itself directly before the rest of the investigation unit managed to get there and started their own investigation. Now, whether or not the perp who did this is actually part of the investigation unit themselves or is an unrelated third party to the investigation unit, I don't know the answer to that either. Again, all this really is just a possibility that I thought about. I don't have any real hard evidence to back it up yet. Or maybe disprove it. Maybe there's just something totally different from what I'm thinking going on here. Anyway, I said I'd let this meeting go. So, the exhausted, fed-up detectives all wondered how many more hours worth of unproductive meetings they would be forced to sit through. Matsunaga was about to start hearing the reports from each investigator when, suddenly, Bon hesitantly stood up and raised his hand.
ちょっといいですかね。
なんだね。
Inquisitive eyes and expressions landed on Bon not just from Matsunaga, but from Suwa and the detective sitting next to him as well. Bon smiled his usual flippant smile, quickly bowed his head, then looked around the room.
先日インターネット上に投稿されたいわゆる集団ダイブの映像についてなんですが、実はちょっとした発見をしまして。
え？
The surprise on Suwa's face was evident. In all likelihood, he was surprised. After all, Bon had examined the video without saying a word to him. It was not because he had wanted to keep it a secret from him, however. No.
バン警部補、君は確か貼り付けの捜査担当だったはずだが、なぜ集団ダイブについて調べている？
This was the reason. Bon had disregarded the orders he had been given by his boss, the head of the investigation team. If Bon had involved Suwa, a promising new detective, his partner would have inevitably been harshly rebuked by their boss. Bon wanted to avoid this.
まあ、とりあえず見てくださいって。
With a chuckle, Bon took out 2 enlarged photos from a file he held in his hand and attached him to the blackboard with magnets.
これはどっちも集団ダイブの現場となったコーネリアスタワー屋上の写真です。
What the hell? The skyscraper that's shown on the left photo, the big, huge one, it's entirely missing from the photo on the right. What the hell is going on here? Wait a minute. Did someone create that tower through a power of delusion made manifest? And then once the murder was done, they just simply wished it out of existence? Okay, if that's what's going on here, then I guess the obvious question is, who made that happen, and how were they able to create or disappear an entire damn skyscraper? Like, how much power would be required for that sort of thing?
右の写真は例のミュウツベ投稿映像から抜き出したもの。左のは昨日の夜 私がタワー屋上に行って取ってきたものになります。
So the tower on the left on the left photo didn't exist up until recently, until after the group dive.
何か違いに気づきませんか？
あ、
The entire conference room began to stir.
背景がね、違うんです。投稿映像のカメラは北東へ向かってる。5人が転落したのが北東だったから間違いない。で、映像では3分29秒から約15秒間、カメラが左右へ大きく振れるんですが、その時に東に向いた時の映像がこの右側の写真なわけです。コーネリアスタワーの東、つまり六本木方面ですね。東京タワーが夜景の中にしっかり映ってる。赤いから目立ちますね。でもね、もう一つよく目立つものが映ってないんですよ。
Bond's eyes narrowed as he combed his beard with his fingers, and then a wry smile appeared on his lips.
六本木ビルズですよ。
It was true. The lights of Roppongi Bills could not be seen in the photo he had taken from the upload photo. But in the photo Bond had taken the day prior, the lights of Roppongi Bills' many windows were very clearly visible along with Tokyo Tower.
で、たまたま見つけたんですが、コーネリアスタワーのホテルロビーにタワー完成当時のパネルが展示してありましてね。そのパネルの一つがこれ。
Bond retrieved a new photo from the file and pinned it next to the previous two. It was also a picture of the Roppongi area, taken from the rooftop of the tower, but it was not a picture taken at night. It was taken at day.
六本木ビルズが映ってますよね。建設中ですが。
The commotion in the conference room grew even louder. Matsunaga, meanwhile, remained silent as he stared at the photo with a stern expression.
コーネリアスタワーの完成は2001年。六本木ビルズの完成は2003年。タワー完成当時の写真では当然ながら六本木ビルズは建設中でまだ高さもほとんどない。だが集団ダイブが起きたのは今年2008年で映ってなきゃおかしいですよね。六本木ビルズ。ちなみに投稿映像に細工された形跡はなかった。
つまり何が言いたいんだ？
Having seemingly lost patience with the detective, Matsunaga urged him onward discontentedly.
非常に言いにくいんですが。
まさか先輩、この映像が撮られたのは2003年以前、つまり5年以上前って言いたいんですか？
That would be the Occam's razor answer to this conundrum we got here, I will admit. But I can't. But again, given that we've seen firsthand our ability to make manifest objects within the environment using the power of delusion, like that flower bed, all the while altering any onlooker's perception of that flower bed and having never existed prior to it being made manifest. Who's to say that the discrepancy that we're looking at right here and now isn't also a result of the power of someone's delusions? Dang it, Suwa. Bond's shoulders slumped dejectedly. The young detective's keen insight was brilliant. Suwa had said exactly what Bond had intended to say. However, having said it aloud in such a straightforward manner only made the the claim, excuse me, I don't know where I got clam, appear all the more dubious. Bond's careful planning on how to articulate his points had been all for nothing.
バカバカしい。小説の読みすぎではないかね。
Well, he is a detective. I would assume that detective stories would be kind of required reading for his profession, don't you think?
映像に映っている被害者5人の顔は一致しているんだ。あれが5年前のもののはずがない。そんなつまらないことを調べている暇があったら、聞き込みの一つでもしたらどうだ、警部補。
ああ。
今のは聞かなかったことにする。それと、後で話があるから会議が終わったら残りたまえ。
God damn it, Sua. You foiled my plans! After letting out a short sigh, Bond gave up and sat back down. Well, it's not like I expected him to believe me. Bitter and unwilling to accept defeat, Bond muttered that inside his head before returning to listlessly fanning his face with his handheld fan. And yet, despite all the work he had done, if one were to ask what the absence of Roppongi bills in the video signified, Bond would be unable to answer. Whoops. After I found out that Nanami was alive, the doctor came to me and asked me a few simple questions. They wanted to make sure whether or not I was well enough to leave. I answered the questions to the best of my ability, then opted to leave the hospital before my mom came back. After that disgraceful behavior I'd showed off in front of the entire country, how was I supposed to face my family now? With defiant dignity. And if Nanami were to come back, I knew that I'd be so happy I'd immediately burst into tears all over again. Just don't go blubbering all your tears and mucus all over her shoulder or something. I doubt she'd appreciate that. And then, since she wouldn't know why I was crying, Nanami would then take it seriously and start yelling at me not to worry about her. Probably while calling me an idiot, too. When I thought about that, I nearly fainted from the sheer embarrassment. And so, instead of letting that happen, I decided to employ a strategic retreat. Don't worry, I'm sure that Nanami will come knocking on your base soon enough. If your parents are indeed really that upset with you, they'll send Nanami as an agent of their aggression and frustration with you, and come knocking. A nurse brought in the most disgusting eating breakfast of all time, and after chipping away at it slightly, I snuck out of the hospital room. What's the breakfast? Frog's legs? I made my way down to the first floor, and then into the lobby. The clinic hadn't opened yet, so the lobby that was usually packed with old people was completely deserted. Doesn't sound deserted. I confidently walked toward the front entrance. Luckily for me, the automatic door opened, giving me free rein to exit the building. The hospital staff might have gotten angry at me for leaving without asking them first, but I had to stay away from the hospital until everything calmed down. As for the medical fees, I left my mom a note telling her to go ahead and pay for it, so it should be fine. They'll definitely send Nanami knocking on your base for sure for this. Again, assuming she's actually okay. Despite the fact I had stayed overnight at the hospital, I wasn't exhibiting any actual symptoms, and my mental state was doing much better after I learned Nanami was alive. Making sure to keep an eye out for any ambushes by Shougan, or Yua, or Shougan, I quickly made my way back to my base. I made it back. My mental state had done a complete 180 since I'd last been at my base. Oh yeah, what are you gonna do about that about that hand in a box that you got? I can't imagine that it'd be terribly. Yeah, I can't imagine just tossing it in a trash or in a dumpster somewhere will end well for you, especially if someone decides to go dumpster diving, and then they find that thing, and then they turn it to the police, and then they search for fingerprints on the box, and on the aluminum foil, and then they find your prints on it. Eating it wouldn't really work either. Maybe get yourself an oil drum and burn it. Of course, I was feeling a lot better now. If only I could have let my past self know that. You let yourself get... Oh. You let yourself get baited far too often, mate. I rate 8 out of 8 mine. At least I think it says mine. There's no reason for you to get so riled up, dude. Anonymous's fine. Lol. Times 100. Or something along those lines. Thinking back on it, yesterday really had been a living hell. Everything had just gone to shit. It did, didn't it? I got on a weird phone call in the morning. Then there'd been an earthquake. Then the data on my hard drive had disappeared. Then I had to witness Ayase try to off herself right in front of me. Then I got an email from Shougan. Then he sent me a severed hand. A severed goddamned hand. You know, if it's not Nanami's hand, whose hand does it belong to? If we're talking about the same person who's had a hand in all the new gen murders, assuming that the murders weren't carried out by more than one culprit, then the first thought that comes to mind is maybe that hand belongs to whoever that fetus belonged to in what was it called? The man baby murder? The one that had that guy the one where that fetus was stuck in that man's guts while he was still alive. If memory serves, the police were unable to locate the woman where that fetus originally came from. So maybe that fetus and the hand we got in the box might have come from that same woman. My mood plummeted in an instant. With a gulp, I turned my attention to the fridge. Of course you refrigerated it. That's where the hand is. Well, then again, that's actually probably the smart thing to do, because if you don't keep it cool, it'll decompose a lot faster, and, well, this place would stink something fierce. Before I'd left yesterday, I decided in my maniacal state to just put the hand in the fridge for the time being. If I left it out somewhere, it could have started rotting. The smell of blood was also way too strong for me. There were all sorts of sci-fi anime and movies where, as long as they remained frozen, people could stay in a state of suspended animation for hundreds of years. So that was pretty much what I was going for. You need something a lot colder than a freaking fridge for that, my friend. I thought that, if I could keep Nanami's arm fresh, she might have been able to get surgically reconnected once she was back home safe. I bet it's not going to be in there. I bet the same person who left that hand in this place originally already came back and got it and took it back from you. But if that wasn't Nanami's hand, then who the hell did it belong to? And how would that explain the cell phone and the bangle? If I wasn't missing something, then it had to belong to Nanami. When I called her, It had rung on the cell phone held in the hand. Or maybe it had just been all part of Shougan's trap. Was it even possible to make such a perfect replica of Nanami's arm?
もう一度確かめてみるべきかも。
In truth, I really didn't want to. The entire hand thing grossed me out. Just thinking about it made me want to puke, even if it did belong to Nanami. But that didn't mean I could just keep it in my fridge forever. Not even my supply of cola stayed that cold in it. I considered asking the police to come to take it, but then I realized they just suspect me being the new-gen culprit. Even more than they already did, that is. It would practically be suicide to dial 110 and go, "Hello, yes, please come and take this person's severed hand off my hands. Thank you." What should I do? Should I just throw it away? Not recommended. But supposing it was Nanami's arm, it really didn't sound like a good idea to throw it away. Hell, were you even allowed to throw away human hands like that? Legally speaking, no. Did they constitute as burnable or non-burnable trash? That's a good question. I tore at my hair. There was no point continuing to torture myself over it. I just go ahead and check one more time that the bangle was on her wrist, and that she was holding her cell phone. Was it Nanami's? Or was it someone else's? How would you have... Well, then if it was someone else's phone, then that would mean that that the Shougan we dealt with also had to get access to your phone at some point without your knowledge, and tamper with your contact list. So you would end up calling that particular phone instead. Which then raises the obvious question, when were they able to pull that off? Last I checked, you keep your phone with you at all times, don't you? That was the question I hoped to answer. Well, then again, there might have been like one or two instances where you didn't have it, but those would have been well before this happened. So no. No, I think it is her phone. I stood in front of the refrigerator and gripped the handle. I closed my eyes, and then I took one, then two, then 3 deep breaths. Unsurprisingly, the temptation to just call Rimi and ask her to do it for me crept up into my mind, but I quickly shook it away. No matter how good of an ally Rimi was to me, there was no way she wouldn't freak out upon finding someone's hand in my fridge. And then if I managed to fuck up the explanation, she'd fall out of love with me and then turn me into the police. I love that's what your word... Never mind. I was gonna have to do this on my own, somehow.
くそ。
I clenched my teeth, took 3 more deep breaths, and then I yanked on the handle with all my might.
あれ
Called it. It's gone. He was empty. Entirely empty. I thought for sure that I put the hand in there yesterday. It'd been wrapped up in aluminum foil. It should have been on the top shelf. And yet, there was no sign of it. All that was there was a few bottles of cola and a bunch of rotten clementines. Nothing else.
消えた。なんで
Just like that, it was completely gone. I crouched down and looked farther into the refrigerator. But of course, it still wasn't there. There wasn't much in there to begin with, so it was already practically empty. There was no way I could have missed it.
昨日ここに入れたよな。
Or maybe I just assumed that, in reality, I just left it somewhere. I closed the fridge door. then looked around my trash-filled room.
段ボールもない。
The large cardboard box with a hand inside of it. What had I done with it? I felt like I tossed it into the corner of my room or something, but... Either way, my memory of last night was very unclear. More things had happened yesterday than my poor brain could handle, and everything was made all the more brutal due to the utter chaos of it all. Calm down. Just calm down. Now, get your thoughts together. Think of why it might have disappeared. Someone came and took it. I booted up the word processor on my PC and wrote down all the possibilities I could think of. Number 1, my mistake. I put it somewhere else in my room. You would have found it by now, I'm sure. Number 2, I myself took it outside yesterday and threw it away somewhere. 3, Shougan took it back. I vote that. 4, the police searched my house and confiscated it. If that happened, you'd probably be arrested by now. 5, the mass media broke in and stole it. I don't think the mass media even knew about you prior to our little show yesterday, so no. 6, the hand never existed in the first place. Well then, if that's the case, then that would then necessitate that the bangle and the phone that we somehow ended up calling would have had to have been made manifest too. Which then raises another question, like, okay, assuming the phone itself that we saw didn't actually exist, why did our phone end up calling it rather than Nanami's actual phone, which already existed? My base had been unlocked ever since yesterday, so if someone really wanted to, they could have come right in and taken it without much trouble. That would also be consistent with how Shougan had been able to put that hand in my room in the first place. Or maybe it was number 2. My memory of when I left my base to go to O-Front was unclear. The feeling that I had saved Nanami, seeing the severed hand, how terrified I was of Shougan. All those emotions swirled around me, invading each and every corner of my mind. I couldn't calm down at all. Maybe I just left my base and tossed a hand in a dumpster somewhere without knowing it. Or maybe the whole hand thing in general had just been a delusion, and it didn't actually exist at all. Well, if it didn't actually no. Never. Well, if it didn't exist, then that would then mean that whoever put that hand there had to have had the power to make manifest that hand in the first place. And given what we've seen of Shogun's abilities up until the O-Front incident from the previous episode, I can't exactly dismiss the possibility he could do something like that. But I'm running with the idea that the Shougan that we dealt with in the previous episode is a different person from the one we've been dealing with prior to that incident. So that then would beg the question whether or not this second Shougan has any power to manifest delusions into reality too. But seeing as how I've yet to prove that a second Shougan actually exists, I think I should stick to confirming or disproving their existence first before I then start to determine whether or not they have any powers of their own. Or in other words, one step at a time, Neo, is what I'm trying to say. But when I went to check my email, I found the one I'd gotten from Shougan yesterday did in fact exist. And in that email, he clearly stated that the hand was a present. Not to mention that Shougan himself had talked about it yesterday. I just couldn't believe that it had just been a delusion. Okay, Then what about the possibility that the police or the media took it? Those people looked at otaku freaks like they were no better than shit smeared on the bottom of their shoes, so it wouldn't surprise me. After everything that happened yesterday, I was afraid to look at the internet. And yet in the end I couldn't help myself, so I clicked open my browser. Again, if it was the mass media who broke in here and stole it, you gotta ask yourself the obvious question, how would they have known about you? Or the Hand, for that matter, when all their headlines were concerned about was the show you were putting on. Come on, man. Think about this for a second. First, I checked the news section on Taboo, as well as the news sites I would typically go to. Is the radio wave hijacking Esper just a boy who cried wolf? And sure enough, there were articles upon articles about the uproar yesterday at Scramble Crossing. Scramble Crossing. Not 107. Scramble Crossing. I'm trying to remember where all these different locations are. I'm trying. Not succeeding very well, but I'm trying. Is the radio wave hijacking Esper just a boy cried wolf? The ESP show held by the New Generation boy ended in the worst possible way. In response to the seismic intensity 5 earthquake that struck at noon on October 27th, several news stations, including MHK, BTS, and TV Sunset, broadcasted breaking news reports. Today TV and Fuji's Sun TV, meanwhile, began broadcasting simultaneous coverage of both the earthquake and the Esper show starting at 9 p.m. Following this, the two stations were immediately flooded with call after call protesting this decision. When faced with the disappointing end to the show, the nearly 5,000 fans that had crowded in front of Shibuya Station all began to boo loudly for over an hour, with some fans even fighting amongst themselves. The situation resulted in 13 separate arrests. The commotion began with a prank email sent by a boy, hereby referred to as N, living in Shibuya Ward. At first, news stations were skeptical of the email, which claimed that the boy was a clairvoyant Esper who could see the culprit behind the New Generation madness, the popular name for a series of brutal incidents taking place in Shibuya. However, when American psychic detective Yuri Brightman, age 43, informed Today TV and Fuji-Sun TV that he would be willing to become the boy's legal guardian, both stations immediately took him at his word. Or so the story goes. The ratings for both Today TV and Fuji-Sun TV were extraordinary, the highest simultaneous viewership exceeding 40%. These are astonishing figures, surpassing even that of Kohaku ringing in the new year. Although these figures may only be for the simultaneous broadcast for the earthquake report, the broadcast was obviously a huge success in terms of viewership. However, the boy starring in the show, N, did not turn out to be an Esper. He repeatedly riled up the audience by motioning like he was going to jump off the building, but his performance did not extend beyond that. Undeterred, the media companies dared to go up on the rooftop to report on the situation and attempt to get a comment about the New Gen incidents, but they were unsuccessful. The boy was found collapsed on the rooftop, holding a moe anime figure and a costume from a popular Hollywood film. According to otaku culture expert Professor Hashiba Yoshiro of Meisei University, there has been a rapid increase in the number of young people who dream of becoming heroes, but in the pursuit of this dream, act with no regard to the world around them. Under the influence of anime, video games, and other similarly damaging media, they have lost the ability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. This is likely what is causing them to act in such a way. They require psychological care, Whatever you say, Jack Thompson. I hadn't sent any emails to the media. I'd never even seen Yuri Brightman's show, let alone met him. So what the hell? Was this all just part of Shougan's plan, like I originally thought? What was his ultimate goal here? He said something about being a quest or something. Okay, then what was the point of having the mass media televise me trying to get my hands on a sword? I didn't get it. What was Shougan trying to accomplish? He'd even released Nanami alive. I followed the links to various articles, but even after reading through all of them, not a single one of them mentioned Shougan. There had been practically no gap at all between when I tackled Shougan and when the media had come bursting onto the rooftop. Even if Shougan had managed to escape during that window, the media would have seen him. And not only that, but Shougan was supposed to be stuck in a wheelchair. He was supposed to be paralyzed, so there was absolutely no way he would have been able to escape the rooftop in such a limited time frame. I went to check on at channel, and to no one's surprise, the enormous shitstorm was going on. An enormous shitstorm was going on. My real name was being plastered everywhere. It is I, Anonymous! The uniform that Nichijou dumbass was rocking was from Sume, isn't it? Are there any Sume students in this thread right now? That guy is a terminal fucktard. Do us all a favor and off yourself, you piece of human trash. Lemao. Nichijou, you need to chill the fuck out. Fuck's sake. It'll be your fault if otakus start getting beat up again. I have a feeling otakus have no problem getting beat up whatsoever with or without Takumi's help. Just saying. Although I'd like to see anyone try that with me. They found him carrying a figure? Lol. It was a goddamn Sarah Bloodtoon figure. What the fuck? And just like that, otaku freaks around the world all just shed a tear. This Nichijou fucker should just stay inside like the shut-in he is. TV's not for him. Lol. Sarah would be like, Nichijou, you big dum-dum. Time for me to kick your fat butt with my awakened form rocket body blow attack. Does he look fat to you? Sounds to me like you need a prescription. Old. Some rando was a classmate of his last year already came out and doxed the guy.
鬱だ
Everyone was just saying whatever the hell they wanted to. They weren't even considering how I felt as they talked all this shit about me. Why would they? Having that channel as your enemy was a scary thing. And it was all Shougan's fault I was in this mess. I was wondering if anybody had leaked any sensitive information onto at channel. The stuff that couldn't be aired on TV. But I couldn't find anything that fit that criteria. What about the guy who doxed you? I hadn't been alone on that rooftop. There had been one more person. And yet, not a shred of information had come out about them. It was almost like the being known as Shougan had never been there in the first place. Maybe the Shougan that appeared on the rooftop was just an illusion. Maybe. Even if I know for a fact that he exists. There's a possibility that the Shougan I saw at O-Front was just a delusion I created. I don't think that's what this is.
僕はやっぱり病気なのかも
You say that like you ever had it to begin with. There were so many things happening that shouldn't have been possible in real life. It was more like a video game at this point. There were two worlds. One where Nanami was alive, and one where she was dead. and the two options were running parallel to one another, meaning I got to choose between them, just like a choice you'd find in an eroge. The future was divided into countless different branches, and what made me different from normal people was that I could stimulate what story events might occur using my delusions. And I was in the middle of simulating the route that would lead to the bad ending. Like one where Nanami died. Or one where Ayase jumped to her death. Or one where I fell off Ofrent and died. We already experienced that one. In other words, for some reason, all these things that you'd normally find in the bad ending route could be coming after me. Almost like they were hunting me down, due to a trap I myself had set. Congratulations, you played yourself. Maybe I just had the desire to leave behind my boring, uneventful life and go to a more exciting world. Like one from a game. And because of that, I've been unconsciously showing myself what that would look like. It couldn't be it. I didn't have any desires even remotely like that. Or at the very least, I would never want to make myself go through anything that'd make me feel sad or scared. Simulation or not.
っていうか、どれだけ想像力豊かなんだよ。
Maybe for the rest of the world that'd be true, but in Shibuya, sky's the limit, apparently. What I've been considering was nothing more than some childish bullshit delusion I'd come up with without thinking. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and looked up at the ceiling with a blank stare on my face. Reality isn't set in stone. Anything and everything just felt fake. The world I was living in was completely hollow. Well,
今日午後8時ごろ、渋谷区の渋谷川で女性の変死体が発見されました。被害者は江戸川区に住む十勝あやみさん27歳で、死因は喉を詰まらせたことによる窒息死とみられています。警察の調べによりますと、被害者の右手の肉が削り取られて骨が露出しており、また胃の中からは人間の肉とみられる内容物が見つかりました。被害者は自らの右手を噛みちぎって食べたとみられ、また足首が紐で縛られていたとのことです。警察では自殺・他殺の両面から捜査を進めています。
well, I guess this certainly explains where the hand came from. But I guess, but that kind of also just proves my theory that the owner of the hand belonged to the same person who donated the fetus for the man-child murder. So I guess we're back to square zero in regards to figuring out who the fetus actually belongs to. Group dive, man-child, crew fiction, vampire, numbskull, finger food. Finger food. KFC, eat your fingers off. Ever since the seismic intensity 5 earthquake, the city of Shibuya had been overwrought with an air of pure bloodlust. The sense of order in the city had been visibly deteriorating. This decrease in security was not just regarding fights among young people, but the increasing number of store windows being broken, as well as a large surge in theft. The media continued to use the term new generation in order to establish a feeling of crisis and entrapment. In response to such fear-mongering, a handful of stores had abruptly ceased operations. Oh no, is that going to also include animate? In addition, a group calling themselves the Anti-New Gen had suddenly transformed into a riotous mob during one of their weekly demonstrations, charging the Shibuya police station and resulting in the arrest of over 100 people. Much like the Esper Boy riot, thousands upon thousands of curious onlookers gathered in the area in order to enjoy yet another shitstorm. There was a striking difference in excitement between those who were visiting a city and those who lived in it. The former expected Shibuya to be more brutally eventful than ever, while the latter condemned the lawlessness of their home and insisted on strengthening police authority. Then, as if to mock all the uproar, the 6th New Gen incident occurred. And of course, the perpetrator had yet to be apprehended. This town's losing its damn collective mind. It had been a week since the earthquake, and in that period of time, I had been suspended from school. You brought shame to our glorious academy! Away with ye! Even if I hadn't been suspended, I wouldn't have been in a proper mental state to go to school anyway. The day immediately following the earthquake, another New Gen incident had occurred. That incident, just like the murder of Dr. Takashina, was obviously supposed to send a message to me. It was a woman who had bitten off her own right hand. There was no doubt in my mind that it was supposed to allude to Nanami's severed right hand. Nanami was clear bait from Shougan to lure me out, but even though I knew that, the thought that Nanami could have been the one killed sent shivers down my spine. And since I became famous in Shibuya in the worst sense of the word, I was now more terrified of going out than ever. If I had a hole to crawl into, I would have done it with no hesitation. Even going to the convenience store to buy food for myself killed me, and there had been entire days I went without eating. It was impossible for me to walk outside with my head not glued to the ground. It always felt like someone was laughing at me. The gazes of other people terrified me. I didn't want to talk to anyone, to see anyone. People from the mass media had been trying to bother me constantly, but I ignored every single one of them. I hadn't called my parents, nor had I talked to Nanami. I hadn't been playing ESO either. If it somehow got out that I was Nineheart, I would be absolutely fucked. It had been 1 week now. Was that enough time for everything to cool down? Not by a long shot. People always say, oh, they'll forget about it in a month. But hopefully it didn't actually take that long. And I mean, trends did go by extremely quickly these days. The slang people used would become obsolete by the next year. Even net slang and memes that people use online died out in just a couple of months. Television sought out heroes, idols, villains, or whatever else that would excite the public, and as soon as it found them, it consumed them for all their worth, then promptly discarded them. Even the New Gen cases, which would have been going on for 6 cases now, were quieting down. No one even talked about the first case on @channel anymore. Everything faded from people's memories in the blink of an eye. Which is why I was hoping that, in the past week, everything that had happened to me had already faded from the public's consciousness, just like some passing trend. Even if it was just wishful thinking, I couldn't help but hope that it might be true. My head and stomach started to pang. I sat down on my usual bench and calmed myself down. Sayritan would know what to say right now.
そんなに苦しむぐらいならもう学校になんか行くのやめればいいっしょ。
I was at the point where I was starting to consider it. I mean, due to the worsening security, more and more people have been opting out of school in Shibuya Ward, so it wouldn't just be me. And I'd always thought that it made no difference whether or not I graduated. So much so that I'd be willing to drop out of school right now. But despite that, I still plan to continue going, even if it meant risking running into Yua. Yeah, now that you mention it, I'm pretty sure she caught wind of your show too. I wonder what she thinks of this. I gulped down a cola I bought at a vending machine on the way to the park, then stood up from the bench. I should just stop kidding myself. I didn't want to go to school, but I didn't want to quit it either. Because if I quit school, I wouldn't be able to see Rimi anymore. We were classmates, so as long as I kept going to school, I'd be able to see her without going out of my way to do so. But if I lost that, I could always just call her or go meet with her directly, but like I said, that would mean I have to go out of my way to contact her. And I knew for a fact I couldn't do that. In fact, I already hadn't been able to bring myself to see her for a while now.
私が一緒にいてあげる。
That was what Rimi had promised me. And I hadn't heard from her for over 10 days now. Not a single word. Not a single word in 10 days? Especially after everything that happened? That concerns me greatly. What the hell could be going on with her where she doesn't contact you for that long, especially given the circumstances? Something didn't happen to her, did it? The thought that Rimi, my one and only ally, might have fallen out of love with me after seeing my disgusting behavior on TV. It destroyed me. I was terrified. I felt like crying. And I never felt so alone. Is Misumi just a joke to you, Takumi? Why don't you go to him for company? No one, not even Nanami, had come to see me. I was being subjected to thread after thread of endless slander on the internet. I was scared shitless by even the idea of Shougan and Yua. And while I said before that I didn't want to see anyone, the loneliness was eating away at me. I wanted Rimi to come and see me. I wanted her to hug me gently and tell me it would all be okay. It must have been so hard, but I'm here now, she would say. In the end, Rimi had spoiled me rotten. But she wasn't wrong for doing so. Rimi had taught me the warmth that 3D could have. Aww. And now that I knew what that warmth felt like, I had never stopped wishing for it ever since. I couldn't get that kind of peace from 2D or delusions anymore. I couldn't survive on just my delusions. I wanted to see her. Oh, passing through, going into school even though you're suspended. That's awfully brave of you, Takumi. When I passed through the school gate, I hadn't noticed any particular change in the atmosphere. That is to say, no one had noticed me. Oh, give it a minute or two. Someone will. I entered the building and started up the stairs. A girl I didn't recognize went to pass me. But just before she did, she let out an audible ah and looked at me with pity in her eyes. Forget a minute. Make it 10 seconds. I walked into the hallway where my classroom was located. Several windows were broken, and I could feel people's gazes mercilessly burning through me as they whispered. At that moment, I was hit with a very bad feeling. My wishful thinking was already on the verge of shattering to pieces. But even so, I opened the door to my classroom, fueled by my one desire: to see Rimi. The silence lasted for about 10 seconds. Everyone was frozen. They all stared at me. I kept my head down as I walked through the quieted classroom and took my seat. As if on cue, a Dokyun sitting in the last row, whose name I didn't know, spoke up.
おい、西条、超能力見せてくんね。
And with those two sentences, time started moving again in the classroom.
それ言ったらかわいそうじゃね。だってユーリが認めた男なんだぜ。そうそう、俺テレビ見てたぜ。すげえよ、あのやらせ超能力者。
西条もどうせやらせなんでしょ。
大きい人形と小さいお人形を抱えてただけだもんね。
やめとけって。西条は病気なだけだっつうの。そっとしといてやれ。だってあいつ空飛べるらしいじゃん。あとなんだっけ、投資。
私投資されたらどうしよう。服もスケスケで裸見られる。
That's not how clairvoyance works, you dumb broad.
西条変態じゃん。
お、やっべ、こっち見た。石にされる前に目をするぜ。大丈夫、実際のところただの妹だから。
Never underestimate the power of nerd rage. This is hell. This was exactly what I'd feared the most. The Dokuns had their eyes on me now. It'd been a week, but no one had forgotten about the uproar I'd caused. I was now the laughingstock of Japan. The boy who, after trying to show off his special powers to the masses, went home and slept with a figure. There was no point in protesting, saying that I'd never called myself an Esper. The truth was meaningless now. Right now, the truth was just the one story that everyone in Japan was familiar with. The story that tens of millions of people recognized to be truth. There was no fixing that. No one could. Not me. Not anyone on TV. Not even Shougan. I was a self-proclaimed Esper who no one would ever associate with. I was an absolutely revolting male otaku. The biggest freak anyone had ever seen. Not a single person would ever look at me with anything other than disgust. I'd always hated TV shows that made fun of otakus, and now I just added fuel to the fire. I didn't have any psychic abilities. I couldn't fly. I didn't have clairvoyance. I didn't have telekinesis. I couldn't obtain a D-sword. I'd even given up on trying to save my sister just so I could save myself. Like the complete piece of shit I was. I was just an otaku that had nothing to show for his life other than his knowledge of anime, video games, and whatever other media. So it only made sense that I couldn't do it. I fought off my imminent mental breakdown and searched for my savior, Rimi. When I did, my eyes met Misumi-kun's, only for him to immediately look away. With friends like these, who needs enemies? I guess that was only fair. If you hung out with me, the entire class would shun you too. That was why he looked away. It was only natural. Besides, he and I had always lived in two different worlds. I was an otaku, and he was a total alpha male. It was a marvel that we had ever been friends at all. Feeling like I was on the verge of tears, I went back to scanning the room. I searched for anything I could latch onto. I desperately cried out in my mind for Rimi. But she wasn't there. Rimi was nowhere to be found. Why? Was she just absent? Of all times for her to be gone, why now? I didn't have any way to get hold of her. What if she never came to school again? If that happened, I'd likely never be able to see her again for the rest of my life. You have her phone number, don't you? When was the last time you called it? That was the feeling I got. It was like that when she first appeared, too. Back on the first day I saw her at school, Rimi was suddenly in my class, just like that. And now, she disappeared just as quickly. Could she have gotten caught up in an earthquake? Could she be dead? I tried my best to shake off all those negative thoughts, but it was hopeless. I was just getting more and more depressed. And now, my mind was being overwhelmed by an incredibly dark and foreboding delusion. I was starting to wonder if the girl known as Sakiyana Rimi had ever existed at all. Maybe she was just another personality I created inside my delusions, like Seiratan. When I thought of it like that, it all started to make sense. Whenever I needed help, Rimi always came to my rescue, like a knight in shining armor. Whenever everyone else would treat an otaku freak like me like trash, Rimi would treat me with kindness. Had I seriously believed that there was a 3D girl that was just so damn perfect for me? Someone that was pretty much my dream girl? Oh no, delusion. I had no reason to come to school anymore. My one and only delusion was gone. I'm going with Fred. I really was completely alone. Just like I'd always been. I'd always been completely and utterly alone. I started to cry inside my head. It took everything it had just to keep myself from crying in real life. That was all I could do to try and at least maintain some semblance of pride. But that was all it was. A semblance. I tried as hard as I could, just to keep my head down, grit my teeth, and stay in my seat. Even though I didn't want to hear them, I could hear all of my classmates talking. I wanted to run away, but I was too afraid that would only make things worse. Every last one of you should just die. I had nothing left to lose, so why not just die knowing what I loved to the very end? For example, screaming, lifting a chair in the air, and attacking a Dokun with it. It would feel great to finally give those assholes what was coming to them. I stood up in a relaxed manner. The Dokun bastards were still smirking at me like always, unaware of the divine judgment that was about to befall them. I shall smite you with this chair! I casually lifted up my chair. Holding it above my head, I approached Dokun, who had first started making fun of me. My sudden actions caused the Dokun to freeze, grin still on his face. I swung the chair down without a moment's hesitation, hitting the guy square on the head. I felt the chair collide with his skull. The Dokuun collapsed on the spot, and a pall of blood spread out beneath him before I could even blink. For a moment, the classroom was completely silent. And then all hell broke loose. Every boy and girl screamed, looking at me with fear in their eyes, and then turned and ran for their lives. The Dokuun who collapsed to my feet was no longer moving. I swung down the chair with all my might once again. The Dokuun's body spasmed, but he didn't make a sound. He had likely fainted, or perhaps he was already dead. I started to feel a little scared. If I stopped here, who knows when he'd get up and start attacking me instead. He was a Dokuun, so he might even be carrying around a knife in his backpack. I'd already given up on life, but I didn't want the end to be painful. I had to kill him. I couldn't stop until I was sure he was dead. I struck the Dokuun's head with the chair 3 more times. They really could do a better job with looping the screams. Seriously. Then again. Then again. And again. And again. While still slumped down in my seat, I lost myself in that delusion. That felt pretty damn good. A gory splatter flick had played out inside my head. Oh, I'd love to just beat them all to death right now. The more I thought about it, the more I felt the urge to do it. Maybe the moment I did something reckless like that, the simulation of the bad end would end, and the world would then reset. I would then return to the original world where I could make different choices. Rimi would be there. Misumi-kun would be talking to me in his normal, overly friendly manner. Everyone would have completely forgotten about my shameful behavior. No one would be making fun of me. Maybe I should try it. I wouldn't. The center of my head felt fuzzy. It felt kind of feverish. Was this that fever you got before obtaining some new knowledge or power? Or was it some delusional fever? I didn't have a specific name for it if it was. Well, not like it mattered. Maybe I should try it. Even if I couldn't return to the original world, people would just think I was crazy. No, they probably already thought that. So it really didn't matter. It was like I had nothing. It wasn't like I had anything to lose. A week ago, back when the nurse had told me that Nanami was still alive, I'd thought that. As long as Nanami was alive, nothing else mattered. Even my life didn't matter. I didn't care if I was treated like some freak and sent to the nearest hospital. It'd be nice if I ended up in the same one as Iyase. Where had Iyase been admitted to, I wondered. Was it that penitentiary-like hospital that she used to be in? Even that would be fine. Hell, that would even be slightly better than being in the school without Rimi. The urges within me bubbled like magma. I could no longer control them. I slowly stood up. Don't do it, man. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Everyone in the class stared at me, and their expressions stiffened. look. There was no reason to look at a worthless piece of shit like me.
価値なら
Suddenly,
あるよ。
I heard
あ
a girl's voice.
いっぱいある。
Not only that, but it sounds straight out of an anime. I've heard this voice before. The transfer student?
この前飛び降り自殺をしようとした人を助けたのは西条くんだもん。だから西条くんにはたくさん価値はあるよ。
Who? Who the hell was talking to me? I looked around the room one more time. Everyone was all frozen in place due to my odd behavior, but they all kept their mouths shut. I couldn't find a single human being who was talking. But that voice, it was such a strange sensation. It felt like it was coming from directly inside my head. Was it an illusion? Or had I just crafted yet another delusional girl inside my head?
幻聴なんかじゃないのら。妄想でもない。
Huh? What was that? Just now. They were responding to my thoughts. Was someone reading my mind? No, it had to be just a delusion.
コズピーはここにいるよ。
コズピーってなんだよ。ここってどこ？誰なの？
When I shouted, my classmates moved farther away from me, almost like they were trying to run away in fear. Yeah, it's easy for you sons of bitches to talk big, but the minute that I stand up and start speaking, you all cower.
西条くんに価値がないなんて、そんなの全然違う。
The voice didn't answer my question. All the voice did was continue to talk to me in a really strange way.
むしろ西条くんのことをひどく言うクラスのみんなの方が価値がないから。
A shudder ran through me. Goosebumps sprang up on my skin. In an extremely cheerful tone, the voice then said,
いいと思うなら殺しても
Please, no more. I cowered in my seat, cradling my head in my hands. The world hadn't reset. I hadn't returned to the parallel world where Rimi was. Rather, it was like I'd gone completely and utterly crazy. See, we're at this office again. Anyway, what's this tip? Parallel world. A different world that exists parallel to ours in another space-time. It exists in the same dimension as the world we live in, and in some cases, the locations of people and other things residing in it are completely identical. Pretty simple definition, but that is the general gist of it, yeah? It had been a week since Bond had last visited the Frisia office, and things were a little bit different than he remembered. The seas of papers that had been piled high atop each and every desk were now completely absent. They had likely all come crashing down due to the earthquake, but Momose had ordered it to be cleaned up. Because of this, the place looked quite tidy. Staring at it with a sidelong look, Bond let out a single sigh, and then sat down on an office chair when he wheeled out from beneath a desk. He restlessly fanned his face with his favorite handheld fan. Momose, who who had been tapping away at her laptop's keyboard on her desk, took one look at Bond's dismal appearance and scowled.
なーに？来るなりため息なんてついて。
なあ、ももちゃん。何にもないとこから剣が出てくるって手品見たことあるかい？
さあ、手品なんて詳しくないから。
じゃあ瞬間移動は？
箱の中に入ってとかそういうこと？
いやそうじゃなくて。
一体何が言いたいわけ？宴会芸でも覚えたいの？
わかんないんだね。多分関係ないことだからさ。
変な人ね。
Mimose shrugged her shoulders, then took a bite out of the Kinsuba pastry Bond had offered her.
どうぞ、お茶っす。
Sua brought over 2 paper cups. Steam billowed from the green tea that had been poured into them.
あら悪いわね、スバちゃん。お茶組なんてさせちゃって。今日美穂ちゃん風邪で休んでて。
いや、大丈夫っす。
With a cheerful smile on his face, he handed Mimose and Bond each a paper cup. Sua had been taken to the office once before by Bond while they were on another case. Ever since then, Sua had come to look up to Mimose as his mentor rather than his more direct superior, Bond. Oof. Poor Bond. You're not a role model. Mimose also seemed to enjoy Sua's company, and she tended to speak to the young, honest man with a far kinder language than she did to Bond.
それより何の話してたんすか？
どうやったら父兄に受ける宴会芸を覚えられるかって相談をな。
はあ、そりゃ興味深いっす。
スワちゃん、こんなダメ刑事なんかといつまでもつるんでちゃダメよ。もっと優秀な上司に就くのをおすすめするわ。でないとあなたの出世街道が断たれちゃう。
まるで俺が出世絶望的みてえな言い方だな。
事実でしょ。悔しかったらもっと真面目に仕事しなさい。
Oof.
してるんだがな。
Ignoring Bond's frown of disagreement, Mimose held out the box of Kinsuba to Sua.
スワちゃんも食べて。
あ、どうもっす。
言っとくが、それは俺が自腹で買ってきたもんだぞ。
先輩、いただきます。
When he saw his subordinate bow his head and reach for the Kinsuba, Bond let out yet another sigh.
それより二人ともこれを見て。
A line graph appeared on the laptop screen. It had a gently undulating curve that rose and fell like the tide. Gravitation error rate. Sua, who had circled around behind Bond, peered at the graph and cocked his head.
これ、何のグラフっすか？
ここ1年の渋谷近辺の G レートよ。おかしいと思わない？
渋谷の平均 G レートが世界的に見ても高いってのはももちゃんに教えてもらったんだぜ。
そうじゃなくて気のせいかもしれないけど G レートが何者かによって操作されてるような気がするの。
そんなことできるんすか？
さあ、でもグラフを見るとなんだか不自然なのよね。数値が小刻みに変動しすぎてる。10年ぐらい前まで遡って調べてみたんだけど、ここ5年ぐらいはずっとそんな調子なのよ。
前に太田教授だっけか、その人が言ってたなんだっけ、 G レートが半年前から増加してるとかなんだが、その辺と関係あるのかい？
太田教授の調査では G レートはそんなに細かい変動は起こさないっていうことなのよ。
何らかの異常が起こってて、そこに人為的なものを感じるってことか。
でも5年っすよ。それだけ続いてれば異常じゃなくて正常な状態と言えなくもないんじゃないですか？
もう一つあるの。グラフを細かく調べていくと G レートは 毎週末に伸びる傾向にあるのよ。
週休2日のサラリーマンにはありがたいことだな。俺には関係ねえけど。
ああ、土日に休み欲しいっすね。自分もう2ヶ月休みなしっすよ。
The two dejected detectives hung their heads, to which Momose responded with a curt shake of her own.
茶化してる場合じゃないわ。1週間ごとに定期的に変動してるのよ。しかも年末年始やお盆休みなんかは変動がピタリと止まる。
They're awfully punctual.
何かの意志が働いているとしか思えないわ。
年末年始やお盆休みがあるのって人間だけだよな。動物や植物はそんなもんあるわけねえもんな。
実は地球の意志とか。
地球の意志？ずいぶん壮大な話だな。だがもし仮にそんなもんがあったとして、地球が明けましておめでとうとか言うかよ。
冗談っすよ。
年末年始はともかくお盆休みは日本にしかない風習よね。
日本人の社会活動と同期しすぎてか。
渋谷っすから当然なんじゃ。
ちなみにこことここ見て。
Momose first pointed at the center of the line graph, and then to the right where the most recent date was situated.
この2箇所はすごく伸びているでしょ。
一番右はこの1年の最高記録みたいだな。
1年どころかこの10年で最高よ。
日付は
真ん中は3ヶ月前。覚えてる？小さな地震があったでしょ。
なあ、震度3でなぜか8人も死んだ。あれか。あの犠牲者ってなんで死んだのか理由はまだ特定できてないんじゃなかったか。
さあ、そうでしたっけ？
Ignoring the exchange between the two detectives, Momose continued talking.
で、一番右はこの間の地震の日。あの日、大規模な電磁波が発生したのは知ってるわよね。
渋谷中のコンピューターが壊れたらしいな。俺はアナログ人間だからよくわからんな。
自分も自宅のノーパソがやられたっす。復旧してる暇がなくて。
あれは地震の影響で電磁波が起きたって言われてるけど、真相は全く逆かもしれない。電磁波の影響で地震が起きた。
おいおい、そんなことテレビや新聞じゃ言ってなかったぞ。
あくまで私の推測だけど、この2つの地震は天災じゃなくて人災かもって思ってるの。だってどっちも普通じゃないもの。前の地震では震度3っていう規模なのに8人も亡くなってるし、そして今回は震度5で118人。
死にすぎって言いたいのか。
さっきバンちゃん言ったでしょ。亡くなった方の大半は死因が不明って。そんなの尋常じゃないわ。
まあ確かに。
それに空が白く染まったっていう噂もある。
そういえば時間が経つにつれて全く報道されなくなったな。
マスコミに何らかの圧力があったのかもね。
まさか。
明和党か。
おそらくそうよ。
マジっすか？
明和党とつながりのある企業団体を洗うべきか
も。もうやったわよ。
さすがももちゃん、相変わらず仕事早いね。で
Momose raised her hands skyward and stretched far and wide. Tilting her head slightly to the side, a satisfying pop sounded from her bones.
それらしい当たりはなし。お手上げよ。
お手上げってももちゃん。
やっぱももちゃんさんの推測が間違いなんじゃ。
そうかもしれないわね。これでも結構時間かけて調べたのよ。本業そっちのけでね。でも行き詰まっちゃったわ。よほど巧妙に隠されているか。スワちゃんの言う通り、私の推測が見当外れでしかないのか。
こういう時は別の方向から攻めてみるってのがデカの鉄則だぜ。
先輩、なんか心当たりあるんすか？
Bond stopped the hand that was fanning himself, then wet his lips of his tongue.
週末に G レートが上がって得するやつって誰なんだろうな。
Good question. Maybe noticeably. I hadn't heard any more auditory illusions, but I couldn't bear to spend even another second in the classroom, so I booked it to the restroom and hid there until afternoon classes were over. The reason I hadn't immediately headed back to my base was not only because of my lingering regret, but also because I still hoped I'd get to see Rimi. So after school, once everybody left, I'm about to pop in a cough drop at this rate. So, after school, once everybody had left, I snuck back into the empty classroom. And there she was, all alone in the room, smiling at me as I walked in. It was Rimi.
リシー、どこ行ってたの？待ってたんだよ。一緒に帰ろっか、タク。
I was hoping you'd say that. This is exactly what I'd wished for. But I was the only one in the classroom. Nobody was waiting for me. I'd made my way to the courtyard. It was here that Rimi had told me, "I'll stay by your side." And now, there was no one here. My only complaints were the purple flowers in the flower bed, swaying lonesomely in the autumn breeze. I grabbed a vermilion handkerchief out of my bag, the same one that Rimi had given me. I sniffed it, hoping to smell her familiar floral scent. But that smell never came. I had likely washed it once before, and the process erased every trace of her. It was just a regular handkerchief now. The memory lingered, but Rimi did not. With every part of me crying out to see her.
なんて。
I simply wandered around the school grounds.
なんて救いようがないんだ。僕って。
Holding her handkerchief to my mouth the entire time. Well, I wonder if you even could be able to reach Nanami if you called her right now. I disgusted myself so much, I felt like I was going to vomit. After leaving the school, I began to walk around aimlessly. I didn't care about anything anymore. My fears about being attacked by Shougan or Yua or whoever else had completely vanished. I even found myself wishing that they would kill me. As long as it wasn't painful, I welcomed it. My mental state had been completely overtaken by depression. When my gaze happened upon it, the center of Shibuya was so bleak, it only served to accelerate my depression all the more. Not a single smile could be seen on the people walking down the street. All they did was scowl grimly at their surroundings. It gave the place a particularly stark atmosphere. One where it felt as if a fight could break out between the passersby at any moment. Stores that would normally be filled to the brim of people had their shutters practically bolted to the ground. Just by walking aimlessly through Shibuya, I'd already come across a ton of them. I also noticed there were less cars on the road than usual. The jumbotrons that always blared through the streets were now completely silent. And in their place were the incessant sounds of police sirens, car horns, and various cars screeching in the distance. There wasn't a single trace of the mess I caused in front of the station a week ago. Even if I hadn't disappeared from people's memories, the city's memories may have long since driven me into obscurity. How nice it would be if I, too, could wipe away my memories. To know nothing, to be ignorant, to remain a fool. I was sure a person like that lived a life full of sunshine and roses.
無知は罪だ。知らない方が幸せなこともあるという人間もいるわ。そんなのはただの甘えだ。
I had a feeling saneness had said that to me. But was it really so wrong? Being naive. Oftentimes it can be. People. Me. None of us are that strong. I was always wishing for someone to save me. I couldn't do anything on my own. I didn't want to. I stood in the middle of the road and closed my eyes. The most agonizing thing about all of this was that I barely understood what was actually going on. Things like Shougan and D-swords were things I didn't want to know, but I'd ended up learning about them regardless. However, if you were to ask me what they were, I wouldn't be able to answer. I didn't know the answer. Maybe I should just die. Looking to the top of the front building, I thought that to myself. If I were to die, maybe my memories would reset, and I would get to play again. Hey, person controlling me, what do you think? I think you shouldn't do it. This current playthrough is a complete and utter failure. You made a mistake by allowing your joke of a character to grow in levels. You should have made me more like a hero. You should have made me actually cool. I would if I could, believe me. You should have made me more sociable, respectful to women. You should have given me a passionate sense of justice that would allow me to empower the weak. All three of which you could achieve by going to the gym. As I am now, I can't beat the final boss. I can't beat the game, which is why I need to get you bench pressing. I can't do anything, so please don't expect me to. Reset the game. Please. I'm worthless like this. Erase me. Whap. Is that you, Rimi? Did you come to whap me? I wasn't erased. Or maybe it's not me. I could totally picture her whapping me. Instead, I felt the impact of someone bumping into my shoulder.
Oi! 邪魔なんだよ.
I thought it was just an auditory illusion. Earlier this morning, I had heard a girl version of that line, and now it was a guy version. Who asked for that? I'd rather hear a much more moe voice. An illusion I could actually fap to later. Then again, if they were to whisper something sexy in my ear, I'd get a boner even though I was in the middle of the city. Fuhihi. Shameless pervert.
無視してんじゃねえぞ。
なあてめえ、西条だな。
どうなんだ、やらせ超能力少年。
この前テレビ出てたよな。ギャラいっぱいもらったんだろ。
ちょっと顔貸せよ、エスパー君。
Oh, great. I'm dealing with a gaggle of thugs. I opened my eyes. There were 3 men standing all around me. All three of them were wearing baggy clothing, and they had gold, silver, and red hair. Two of them had their noses and ears pierced, and the remaining one had just their ears pierced. One of them was a ganguro, which I'd thought had gone completely extinct before now. There's a death flag, I thought to myself. So this was the bump into confrontation kind of death flag, huh? It really was just one after the other today. Whatever. I don't even care anymore. Just hurry up and kill me. Once you do, the game will reset, and I'll be born anew. Do you have a knife on you? Make sure you stab me in a way that I die instantly, alright? I was so scared. My legs were shaking. I shouted that instinctively. Though I'd been closer to a scream, I didn't care about how it made me look. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die! I was lying about not caring anymore. My situation might be hopeless, but I still don't want to die. One of the Dokuns covered my mouth. I couldn't speak anymore. They grabbed my arms from both sides. I stopped resisting. They dragged me to the deserted alleyway no one would go anywhere near, grinning the entire time. God's judgment. So I decided to launch a preemptive strike against the three men. I got down on my hands and knees and apologized in a shaky voice. I held out my wallet to them. The Dokun snatched it from me.
お前金持ちだな。さすが超能力少年だぜ。お前いいやつじゃん。俺気に入っちゃったよ。
I don't like that you like me. Still on my hands and knees, I breathed a sigh of relief when he said that. If he liked me, he was probably going to let me go.
俺らの仲間に入れてやるよ。入会金は100万円な。これ強制。本当はすぐ払ってもらうとこだけどよ。今日の夜までにしてやるよ。
No thanks. I'll take my wallet back, please.
まあ、なんか超能力使って見せてくれたら半額にしてやってもいいけどな。
なんか言えよ。ん？
Seina, are you nearby? Can you please save me?
超能力見せろっつってんだよ。
Like, seriously, Rimi seems very preoccupied these days, so you're pretty much the only person I can rely on at this point to save my sorry ass. So, if you save me, I'll shine your shoes.
できねえの。
できねえのかっつってんだよ。
I felt a sharp pain jolt through my side. It felt like he'd broken my ribs. I couldn't breathe. I nearly lost consciousness. I was dizzy. Right as I thought that, the Dokun's foot came to view in front of me. Then, aiming directly at my face, his shoe shot toward me at tremendous speed. What just happened? Apparently, Seina didn't come to rescue us. Seina! You're fired! I thought I felt an agonizing pain radiating from my face, but it might have just been a delusion. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids refused to move. The darkness wouldn't go away.
なんだよ、もう伸びたのか？
どうする？このくらいにしとく？
もうちょっと痛みつけといた方がいいんじゃね？あのダーススパイダーの兄ちゃんもそう言ってたじゃん。
Say what?
ボコボコにしてくれって言ってた。
こいつボコるだけで金くれるなんて、よっぽどこいつのこと嫌いなのかもな。
というわけなんで続きまーす。
俺らのこと恨まないでね。
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I want to kill them. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I want to kill them.
おい、何土地狂ってんだよ。ふざけんなよ。なんだそれ。おい、よせ、やめろ。やめて、やだ。
What just happened? Well, look who it is. The pale evening sun shone through the window of a hospital room. The light, singed red by the twilight, divided the room into two distinct parts, one captivated by light and one dominated by darkness. And what was illuminated by that light was a bed adorned with pure white sheets. On the bedside table sat a handheld video game console. A number of academic books lined a nearby shelf, neighbored by the muted pink petals of an arrangement of cosmos flowers resting in a vase. The room was neat and tidy. Nothing moved, nothing stirred. It was a space where time seemed to have come to a stop. The window cut into the evening sky, and by that window was a small figure sitting in a wheelchair. The figure's back to the window, he remained still and motionless. His breathing was so light, and the intervals between each breath were so long, one might think he was already dead. His skin was covered with wrinkles. His cheeks were hollow. His eye sockets were sunken in. His scalp was barren. With these features, it was often questioned whether he should be referred to as a young boy or an old man. His shadow, which he had dubbed Shougan, extended all the way to the door of the room. The world then moved for the first time. The door slowly opened, and the figure emerged from the darkened corridor, stepping foot into the room steeped in evening glow. What the hell? Sakihara Rimi did not fully enter the hospital room, instead choosing to remain at the entrance. Her expression, illuminated by the setting sun, detailed how the girl had been in deep thought.
もうやめよう。残念だけど、あの彼は西条匠は消すべきだよ。
What? Shougan remained motionless in response to her words.
どうして？
危険だから。
Rimi's voice was laden with grief and sorrow. Her eyes appeared slightly moist.
私が消そうか。
ダメだよ。
Rimi was unable to confirm whether or not he was actually moving his mouth to speak.
彼にはやってもらわなくちゃいけないことがあるんだ。
Rimi hung her head, then gently ran her fingers through her hair that draped down before her.
例えば、あなたは夢に見たことを覚えていられる？
うん。
そっか。私、すぐ忘れちゃうんだ。
できる人とできない人がいる。
できる人はきっとロマンチストなんだね。
すごく長い夢をよく見るよ。見ている間は何年にも感じられる。
私もそうだった気がする。でもそれは幻。実際の時間としては寝ているうちのほんの 2,3 秒程度のものなんだって。夢って心の歌方なの。だから早く目覚めて出ないといつかあなたは西条匠に殺されちゃう。
それでも構わないよ。夢から覚めるわけにはいかない。この夢は完結させなくちゃ。
完結した夢の後には何が残るの？
Well, holy shit. It looks like Takumi's initial suspicions that Rimi was one of Shogun's underlings may have actually been pretty close to the truth after all. In that case, Takumi, I truly and sincerely apologize. Looks like you were onto something after all. You weren't just being overly paranoid. So, I'm dangerous. I'm apparently one day supposed to kill Shougan. Possibly. And Shougan is apparently in a dream that he can't wake up from. If I take that last bit at face value, then is the world I'm in right now a dream? Well, if nothing else, I think we've definitely confirmed one thing with absolute certainty at this point. Rimi isn't my ally after all. Which would mean that for Takumi is closer to being truly alone in all this than, yeah. He's not I wouldn't say he's completely alone, but he's definitely closer to it than I initially thought he was. She knows who Shougan is working with him, so when Shougan met us face to face, right in front of Scramble Crossing, and Rimi ran into us shortly afterwards, she could have just been lying that she didn't see anything at all. With the missing city folk and everything else. Just makes me wonder, what else has she been lying to me about? When she was first introduced to us in the story, she claims to have been looking for Takumi. Was she looking for Takumi with the desire and intent to try to erase him right there and then? I got a lot of questions, but I think it'd be best for me to just save those for another time. And just go ahead and end things here. So, towards the very end of this episode, some big developments just ended up occurring that I wasn't expecting to see. And I'm damn curious to see where things go. It feels like we're heading toward, with this stuff, along with the state of Shibuya itself, people growing more restless, losing their minds, along with whatever Nozomi is trying to do behind the scenes. Everything looks like it's heading towards one big, everything feels like it's heading towards some sort of big finale here. And to be honest, I'm kind of dreading to see what it is. Although, if the opening cinematic is anything to go by, I think I'm pretty sure I already know what it's going to be. With all this being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this latest episode of Chaos Head Noah. If you did and you want to see more content from me, feel free to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. And I guess I'll see you all next time for, well, whatever the next episode's got in store for us. Take care.